Good morning, Team Alabama. We are ready for the Diary of Anne Frank. Please turn in your books to page 526. We're in the first column, about halfway down the page, a little bit further. Page 526. So Mr. Kraler and Meep had come to see them, and they were discussing the fact that there's a man in the shop downstairs that's trying to blackmail them. Okay, so we're going to start with Mr. Van Dan. Blackmail? Mr. Frank, 20 guilders, very modest blackmail. Mr. Van Dan, that's just the beginning. Dussel coming to Mr. Frank. You know what I think? He was the thief who was down there that night. That's how he knows we're here. Mr. Frank to Mr. Kraler. How was it left? What did you tell him? I said I had to think about it. What shall I do? Pay him the money? Take a chance on firing him or what? I don't know. Dussel, frantic. For God's sakes, don't fire him. Pay him what he asks. Keep him here where you can have your eye on him. Is it so much that he's asking? What are they paying nowadays? Mr. Frank says. Mr. Kraler, he could get it in a war plant, but this isn't a war plant, mind you. I don't know if he really knows or if he doesn't know. Offer him half. Then we'll soon find out if it's blackmail or not. And if it is, we've got to pay it, haven't we? Anything he asks, we've got to pay it. Mr. Frank, let's decide that when the time comes. Mr. Kraler, this may be all in my imagination. You get to a point these days where you suspect everyone and everything again and again. On some simple look or word, I've found myself. The telephone rings in the office below. Mrs. Van Dan. Hurrying to Mr. Kraler. There's the telephone. What does that mean? The telephone ringing on a holiday? That's my wife. I told her that I had to go over some papers in the office and to call me there when she got out of church. He starts out. I'll offer him half then. Goodbye, and we'll hope for the best. The group called their goodbyes half-heartedly, and Mr. Frank follows Mr. Kraler to bolt the door below. During the following scene, Mr. Frank comes back up and stands listening, disturbed. Dussel to Mr. Van Dam. You can thank your son for this. Smashing the light, I tell you. It's just a question of time now. He goes to the window at the back and stands looking out. Sometimes I wish the end would come, whatever it is. Mrs. Frank shocked. Margot! Anne goes to Margot, sitting beside her on the couch with her arms around her. Then at least we'd know where we were. Mrs. Frank, you should be ashamed of yourself talking that way. Think how lucky we are. Think of the thousands dying in the war every day. Think of the people in the concentration camps. Anne interrupting. What's the good of that? What's the good of thinking of misery when you're already miserable? That's stupid. Anne! Mrs. Frank says to her. As Anne goes on raging at her mother, Mrs. Frank tries to break in an effort to quiet her. We're young. Margot and Peter and I, you grown-ups have had your chance. But look at us. If we begin thinking of all the horror in the world, we're lost. We're trying to hold on to some kind of ideals when everything, ideals, hopes, everything are being destroyed. It isn't our fault that the world is in such a mess. We weren't around when all of this started, so don't try to take it out on us. She rushes off to her room and slams the door after her, and she picks up the brush from the chest and hurls it to the floor. Then she sits on the settee or small couch, trying to control her anger. Mrs. Van Dan, she talks as if we started the war. Did we start the war? That's Mr. Van Dan, sorry. He spots Anne's cake, and as he starts to take it, Peter anticipates him. She left her cake, so Peter's going to take it to Anne. And at this point, they start to talk, and they kind of become friends, and their relationship changes at this point. Kind of take a look at how that relationship changes. He starts for Anne's room with the cake, and there is silence in the main room. Mrs. Van Dan goes up to her room, followed by Mr. Van Dan. Dussel stays looking out the window, and Mr. Frank brings Mrs. Frank her cake. She eats it slowly, without relish. Without relish means without enjoyment. She doesn't enjoy it. She's eating it, but she's not enjoying it. Mr. Frank takes his cake to Margot and sits quietly on the sofa beside her. Peter stands in the doorway of Anne's darkened room and looking at her, and then makes a little movement to let her know that he is there. Anne sits up quickly, trying to hide the signs of her tears, and Peter holds out the cake to her. "You left this, Anne Dolly. Thanks." Peter starts to go out and then comes back. "I thought you were fine just now. You know just how to talk to them. You know just how to say it. I'm no good. I never can think, especially when I'm mad. That Dussel, when he said that about Mooshy, someone eating him, all I could think is I wanted to hit him. I wanted to give him that's what I used to do when there was an argument at school. That's the way but here in an old man like that, it wouldn't be so good." Okay, so he told us something about himself that we can add as a fact. That when Peter was in school, he used to handle his conflicts with his fists. He used to punch people. But he knows better than to hit Mr. Dussel. Dussel's annoying to everyone. Said that he wanted, maybe somebody ate Mooshy. And Peter's distraught, upset about that. "Anne, you're making a big mistake about me. I do it all wrong. I say too much. I go too far. I hurt people's feelings." Okay, page 528. "I think you're just fine. What I want to say is that if it wasn't for you around here, I don't know. What I mean is," Peter is interrupted by Dussel's turning on the light, and Dussel stands in the doorway, startled to see Peter. Peter advances toward him forbiddingly, and Dussel backs out of the room, and Peter closes the door on him. "Do you mean it, Peter? Do you really mean it? I said it, didn't I?" In the main room, Mr. and Mrs. Frank collect the dishes and take them to the sink, washing them. Margot lies down again on the couch. Dussel, lost, wanders into Peter's room and takes up a book and starting to read. Peter, looking at the photographs on the wall. "You've got quite a collection. Wouldn't you like some of them in your room? I could give them to you. Heaven knows you spend enough time in there doing heaven knows what." Remember, Dad brought all of her collections of movie star pictures with him to the attic, and Anne has them hung up in her room. "It's easier. A fight starts, an argument, and I duck in there. You're lucky having a room to go to. His lordship is always here. I hardly ever get a minute alone. And when they start in on me, I can't duck away. I have to stand there and take it. You gave some of it back just now. I get so mad. They form their opinions about everything. But we're still trying to find out. We have problems here that no other people our age have ever had. And just as you think that you've solved them, something comes along and bang, you have to start all over again. At least you've got someone you can talk to." "Not really, Mother. I never discuss anything serious with her. She doesn't understand. And Father's all right. We can talk about everything but one thing. Mother, he simply won't talk about her. I don't think that you can be really intimate with anyone if he's holding something back, do you? I think your father's fine." "Oh, he is, Peter. He is. He's the only one who's ever given me the feeling that I have any sense. But anyway, nothing can take the place of school and play and friends of your own age or near your age, can it?" So Anne's really missing her friend. She's been stuck in this attic now for, what'd they say, like a year and a half now, and she's never able to get out. And the only people she ever sees is everybody in the attic, the Van Dans and her mom and dad. She doesn't really get along with her mom. And now everybody's kind of starting to fuss with each other because they've been stuck in there for a long time. So those are some facts you can add. Peter says, "I suppose you miss your friends and all. It isn't just," she breaks off, staring up at him for a second. "Sorry. Isn't it funny, you and I? Here we've been seeing each other every minute for almost a year and a half, and this is the first time that we've ever really talked. It helps a lot to have someone to talk to, don't you think? It helps you to let off steam." Peter going to the door. "Well, any time that you want to let off steam, you can come into my room." And following him. "I can get up an awful lot of steam. You'll have to be careful how you say that." "It's all right with me." "Do you mean it?" "I said it, didn't I?" He goes out, and Anne stands in the doorway looking after him. As Peter gets to his room, he stands for a minute looking back at her, and then he goes into his room, and Dussel rises as he comes in and quickly passes him going out. He starts across for his room, and Anne sees him coming and pulls her door shut. Dussel turns back towards Peter's room, and Peter pulls his door shut. Dussel stands there, bewildered and forlorn. Okay, there are some good vocabulary words if you want to add them. Bewildered and forlorn. The scene slowly dims out. The curtain falls on the scene, and Anne's voice comes over in the darkness, faintly at first and then growing with strength. We've had bad news. The people from whom Miep got our ration books have been arrested, so we have had to cut down on our food. Our stomachs are so empty that they rumble and make strange noises, all in different keys. Mr. Van Dan's is deep and low like a bass fiddle. Mine is high and whistling like a flute. As we all sit around waiting for supper, it's like an orchestra tuning up. It only needs Toscani to raise his baton, and we'd be off in the ride of the Valkyries. Monday, the 6th of March, 1944. Mr. Kraler is in the hospital. It seems he has ulcers. Pim says we are his ulcers. Miep has to run the business, and us too. The Americans have landed on the southern tip of Italy. Father looks for a quick finish to the war. Mr. Dussel is waiting every day for the warehouse man to demand more money. Have I been skipping around too much from one subject to another? I can't help it. I feel that spring is coming. I feel it in my whole body and soul. I feel utterly confused. I am longing, so longing for everything, for friends, for someone to talk to, someone who understands, someone young who feels as I do. As these last lines are being said, the curtain rises on the scene and the lights dim out and Anne's voice fades out. Okay, Team Alabama, we are going to stop there for today. Please add 4 or 5 new facts to your Google Doc. You should be at 50. If you want to go over 50, those extra credit points will help you out. Have a great rest of your day.